Brandon Mitchell had grown up believing he was untouchable. As the son of Providence Police Chief Thomas Mitchell, he had spent 23 years learning that consequences were for other people. Every speeding ticket disappeared, every noise complaint vanished, every arrest somehow never resulted in charges. His father's position was not just a job, it was a shield that protected Brandon from every mistake, every poor decision, every moment of reckless behavior. And Brandon had learned to wield that shield with arrogance that came from never facing real accountability. But here is what Brandon Mitchell forgot. Courtrooms have their own rules. Judges answer to the law, not to police chiefs. And when you stand before Judge Caprio with an attitude that suggests you are above the justice system, you are about to learn the hardest lesson of your entitled life. What you are about to witness is not just a trial, it is the complete destruction of a young man who believed his father's position made him immune to consequences. The moment when Brandon Mitchell realizes that disrespecting a judge will cost him everything will be absolutely devastating. So, if you have watched this far, do not miss the end. Like the video and dive into the story, because this confrontation between entitled arrogance and unwavering judicial authority will leave you speechless. It is Tuesday morning, 10:06 a.m. sharp, at the Providence Municipal Court. The courtroom is moderately filled with routine cases, lawyers waiting their turn, citizens observing the proceedings. And there, at the defendant's table, slouches Brandon Mitchell in ripped jeans and an expensive designer hoodie, his phone in his hand, earbuds dangling around his neck, looking as if he is waiting in line at a coffee shop rather than facing serious criminal charges. The bailiff's voice cuts through the murmur. The state of Rhode Island versus Brandon Thomas Mitchell. Judge Caprio looks up from his notes, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp. Mr. Mitchell, you stand accused of driving under the influence, reckless endangerment, leaving the scene of an accident and resisting arrest. These are serious charges. How do you respond? Brandon barely looks up from his phone, his tone dismissive. Yeah, whatever. This is all blown out of proportion. My dad already talked to people about this. Judge Caprio's expression does not change, but the temperature in the courtroom seems to drop. Mr. Mitchell, I am going to give you an opportunity to address this court with respect. Put your phone away, stand up straight and answer the question properly. Brandon sighs dramatically, slowly putting his phone in his pocket but maintaining his slouched posture. Look, Your Honor, I get that we have to go through this whole thing, but everyone knows this is just formality. My dad is the police chief. He has already handled it. So can we just speed this up? The courtroom goes completely silent. Every lawyer, every observer, every person present recognizes that Brandon Mitchell just made a catastrophic mistake. Judge Caprio leans forward slowly, his voice quiet but carrying unmistakable authority. Mr. Mitchell, let me make something very clear. I do not care who your father is. I do not care what position he holds. In this courtroom, you are not the police chief's son. You are a defendant facing serious criminal charges, and the way you conduct yourself in the next few minutes will determine whether you walk out of here today or spend the next several months in custody. Do you understand me? Brandon's smirk falters slightly, but arrogance dies hard. Your Honor, with all due respect, my dad and I have already discussed how this is going to go. The charges are going to be reduced. I will do some community service and everyone moves on. That is how these things work. Judge Caprio's jaw tightens. That is how these things work? Mr. Mitchell, let me tell you how things actually work. You are accused of driving drunk through a residential neighborhood at 70 miles per hour, crashing into a parked car, and then fleeing the scene. When officers attempted to arrest you, you physically resisted and told them that they would lose their jobs if they touched you. Does that sound like something that should just go away with community service? Brandon shrugs. I was not that drunk, and the crash was not that bad. The car I hit was old anyway. The cops overreacted because they did not know who I was. Once my dad straightened everything out, they realized it was a misunderstanding. Subscribe to Judge Stories if you believe that being the police chief's son should not place anyone above the law. Judge Caprio picks up the police report, his tone growing sharper. A misunderstanding? Mr. Mitchell, your blood alcohol content was 0.19, more than twice the legal limit. You crashed into a vehicle belonging to a nurse who was working a night shift at the hospital. That car was not just old, it was her only transportation. She now cannot get to work because of your reckless behavior. Where exactly is the misunderstanding? Brandon's voice takes on a defensive edge. Look, I will pay for her car. My dad already said he would handle that. It is not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal? Mr. Mitchell, you drove drunk at excessive speed through a neighborhood where families with children live. You crashed into someone's property, destroying their means of getting to work. You fled the scene like a coward, and when police tried to arrest you, you assaulted an officer. At what point does this become a big deal to you? I did not assault anyone. I just pushed the cop away when he grabbed me, and I only left because I panicked. Anyone would have done the same thing. Anyone would have driven drunk and fled a crime scene. Mr. Mitchell, let me read you exactly what the arresting officer wrote in his report. Judge Caprio begins reading. Upon approaching the suspect, I identified myself as a police officer and informed him he was under arrest for DUI and leaving the scene of an accident. The suspect became immediately hostile and stated, and I quote, "Do you know who my father is? He is the police chief. You are going to lose your job for this. Get your hands off me, or I will make sure you never work in this city again." When I attempted to place handcuffs on the suspect, he shoved me with both hands and attempted to run. Additional officers were required to subdue the suspect. During the entire arrest process, the suspect continued to threaten officers with termination and legal action. The courtroom sits in heavy silence. Brandon's face has gone slightly pale, but his arrogance refuses to completely fade. That cop is exaggerating. I was upset. People say things when they are upset. People say things when they are upset? Mr. Mitchell, you threatened police officers with your father's position while resisting arrest. That is not saying things. That is abuse of power by proxy. Judge Caprio picks up another document. Let me ask you something. Is this the first time you have used your father's position to avoid consequences? Brandon shifts uncomfortably. I do not know what you mean. You do not know, Mr. Mitchell. I have your driving record here. In the past 5 years, you have been pulled over 17 times for various traffic violations. 17 times, yet you have exactly 0 tickets on your record. 0. Every single stop resulted in a warning. Do you think that is normal? Maybe I am just a good driver who gets warnings instead of tickets. A good driver? Mr. Mitchell, you were clocked at 93 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone. You ran a red light while texting. You were caught doing donuts in a hospital parking lot at 2 in the morning. But somehow, mysteriously, every officer who stopped you decided to give you a warning. Why do you think that is? Brandon's voice rises defensively. I do not control what cops decide to do. No, but your father does. And every officer who pulled you over knew exactly who you were and exactly what would happen if they actually wrote you a ticket. You have been using your father's position as a shield for years, and it taught you that you are above the rules everyone else has to follow. Your Honor, that is not fair. I cannot help who my father is. You are right, Mr. Mitchell. You cannot help who your father is. But you can control how you behave. And you have consistently chosen to behave like someone who believes consequences do not apply to you. Judge Caprio leans back. Let me tell you what else is in your record. 3 years ago, you were involved in an altercation at a bar where you punched another patron. Witnesses say you started the fight. But when police arrived, somehow you were not arrested. The other person was. 2 years ago, you were caught with marijuana during a traffic stop. The officer
confiscated it and sent you home. No arrest, no charges. Last year, neighbours filed multiple noise complaints about parties at your apartment. Police were called 8 times. Nothing happened. Do you see the pattern? Brandon's confidence is visibly cracking. Those things are not related to this case. They are all related, Mr. Mitchell. They show a pattern of behaviour where you do whatever you want and your father's position makes the problems disappear. But that ends today, because in this courtroom, your father's badge means nothing. Your Honour, my dad works hard to keep this city safe. He has dedicated his life to law enforcement. You cannot punish me to make some point about him. I am not punishing you to make a point about your father, Mr. Mitchell. I am holding you accountable for your own actions, something that should have happened years ago. Judge Caprio picks up the victim impact statement. Let me tell you about Claire Rodriguez, the nurse whose car you destroyed. She works night shifts at Rhode Island Hospital, taking care of critically ill patients. She is a single mother with 2 children. She saved for 3 years to buy that car. It was not fancy, but it was reliable and it was paid off. Now, because of your drunk driving, she has no way to get to work. She is missing shifts. She is losing income she desperately needs. Her children's daycare is a 15-minute drive from her home, and she has no way to get them there. Do you have anything to say to Claire Rodriguez? Brandon looks down. I already said I would pay for the car. You will pay for the car? Mr. Mitchell, that car was worth $8,000, but Claire Rodriguez has already missed 2 weeks of work, losing approximately $3,000 in income. She has had to pay for ride-sharing services to get her children to daycare and herself to shifts, another $1,000. She has been written up at work for tardiness and unreliability. You have not just damaged her car, you have damaged her livelihood, her reputation, and her ability to care for her children. How much is that worth? Brandon's voice cracks slightly. I did not mean for all that to happen. You did not mean for it to happen, but you chose to get drunk, you chose to drive, you chose to flee the scene. Every choice you made led directly to Claire Rodriguez's suffering, and you only care now because you are standing in front of a judge. Judge Caprio takes a deep breath. Brandon Mitchell, you came into this courtroom with your phone out, your attitude intact, and your belief that your father's position would save you. You disrespected this court, minimized your crimes, and showed no genuine remorse for the harm you caused. You thought this was just another situation where being the police chief's son would make your problems disappear, but you were wrong. Brandon's face goes pale. Your Honor, I am sorry. I did not mean to be disrespectful. I will do whatever you want, just
please give me another chance. Another chance? Mr. Mitchell, you have had 17 chances. 17 times officers gave you warnings instead of tickets. You have had chance after chance after chance, and every time you learned that your behavior had no consequences. Today, that changes. Judge Caprio's voice becomes firm. For driving under the influence with a blood alcohol content of 0.19, I am imposing a sentence of 6 months in county jail. For leaving the scene of an accident, an additional 3 months. For resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer, an additional 6 months. Your sentences will run consecutively for a total of 15 months in county jail. The courtroom erupts in gasps. Brandon's legs nearly give out. 15 months? Your Honor, please, I have a job. I have responsibilities. You cannot send me to jail for over a year. You have a job, Mr. Mitchell, according to the records, you are employed by a security company owned by your father's friend. You work 10 hours per week at $30 per hour. That is not a job. That is an allowance disguised as employment. But, Your Honor, jail will ruin my life. Jail will ruin your life? What about Claire Rodriguez's life that you have already ruined? What about the community you endangered by driving drunk at 70 miles per hour? Additionally, your driver's license is suspended for 5 years. You are ordered to pay full restitution to Claire Rodriguez for her vehicle, lost wages, and additional expenses, totaling approximately $14,000. You will complete 200 hours of community service upon your release, specifically working with victims of drunk driving accidents, and you are required to attend substance abuse counseling and anger management classes. Furthermore, due to your disrespectful conduct in this courtroom, I am finding you in contempt of court and adding an additional 30 days to your sentence. Brandon's entire body shakes. Contempt! Your Honor, I apologized. Please, I did not know I was being disrespectful. My dad is going to kill me. Judge Caprio's response is measured but devastating. Your dad is going to kill you? Mr. Mitchell, for 23 years, your father protected you from consequences. He taught you that his badge was a shield. He enabled every bad decision, every reckless choice, every moment of entitlement. And now you are facing the reality that should have come years ago. Perhaps your father will learn that protecting you from accountability was not love. It was setting you up for this exact moment. The bailiffs move forward. For the first time in his life, Brandon Mitchell is facing real consequences. As the handcuffs click around his wrists, the designer hoodie and expensive jeans suddenly look like a costume worn by someone who mistook privilege for immunity. Brandon begins crying. Your Honor, please, I'm only 23. I'm sorry. I will never do anything like this again.
Please do not send me to jail. Judge Caprio's final words are quiet but carry undeniable weight. Brandon Mitchell, you are 23 years old, and this is the first time in your adult life you are being held accountable for your actions. That is tragic, not because the punishment is too severe, but because it took this long for someone to tell you that your behavior has consequences. You drove drunk through a residential neighborhood and destroyed a single mother's car. You fled like a coward. You assaulted a police officer, and when you stood before this court, you smirked and assumed your father's position would save you. Today, you learned that judicial authority answers to the law, not to police departments. No badge, no title, no family connection places anyone above accountability. Within hours, news of Brandon Mitchell's sentencing spreads throughout Providence. Police Chief Thomas Mitchell releases a statement supporting the judge's decision and acknowledging that his son needs to face consequences. Claire Rodriguez receives notification that restitution will be paid and begins shopping for a replacement vehicle. Officers who had felt pressured to give Brandon warnings for years feel vindicated that the system finally worked. Sometimes the most important lesson about privilege comes from watching someone who spent their entire life hiding behind their parents' position discover that courtrooms do not recognize family connections, only actions and consequences. Brandon Mitchell walked into that courtroom with his phone out, his attitude intact, and his absolute certainty that being the police chief's son meant the rules did not apply to him. He walked out in handcuffs, headed to 15 months in jail, his license suspended for 5 years, where he will have plenty of time to reflect on the difference between privilege and accountability. If you enjoyed this story and believe that no family connection should place anyone above the law, please like and subscribe to this channel. Check out the other stories where we examine what happens when entitled. Individuals discover that judicial authority does not
bow to badges or positions. See you in the next video. Stay healthy.